Welcome to MarkGuy, where we explore self-improvement, motivation, habits, mindset. In today's episode, we're discussing how feminism harms the new generation of men. You know what no one tells you? The very movement that promised equality has created the most confused, apologetic, and psychologically fractured generation of men in modern history. You were taught that masculinity is toxic, that your natural instincts are wrong, that being a man means being a problem to be fixed. And now you're sitting there, wondering why nothing feels right, why you can't connect, why relationships fail, why you feel like you're performing a role that was never meant for you. Picture this. A 28-year-old man sits across from his date, carefully measuring every word, every gesture, terrified of appearing too aggressive, too masculine, too anything. He's been programmed since childhood through school, media, and social conditioning that his natural masculine energy is dangerous. So he performs this elaborate dance of self-censorship. He asks permission for everything, apologizes for his opinions, dims his presence to make space. She looks at him with growing disappointment, not because he's doing anything wrong by the rule book he was given, but because she can sense the absence of something fundamental. What he doesn't realize is that he's not actually there. The real him was buried years ago under layers of social programming that told him his authentic self was problematic. Let me paint you the psychological architecture of what's happening here. Modern feminism, not the equal rights movement of the past, but the current iteration has created what psychologists call a double bind. You're told to be vulnerable, but not weak, sensitive but still protective, feminist, but somehow still attractive to women who are biologically wired to respond to masculine energy. It's like being told to be wet and dry at the same time. Your brain literally cannot compute this paradox, so it defaults to the safest option: suppress everything masculine and hope for the best. This isn't about romance, it's about wiring. Your brain operates on millions of years of evolutionary programming, but you're being asked to override it with about 30 years of social theory. Think about that for a second. How often does that work out in any system? You don't reprogram a wolf to be a sheep and expect it to thrive. Yet that's exactly what's being attempted with an entire generation of men. Phase 1 starts in elementary school. You're more energetic than the girls, more physical, more competitive. But the education system, now predominantly female-led, with over 75% of teachers being women according to recent Department of Education statistics, treats your natural boy energy as a behavioral problem. You're medicated, punished, told to sit still and be quiet. The message is clear: the way you naturally are is wrong. Phase 2 hits in adolescence. Every natural masculine impulse, competition, aggression, sexual desire, the need to establish dominance hierarchies, is labeled toxic. You learn that wanting to be strong is problematic, that male spaces are exclusionary, that even appreciating female beauty is objectification. So you internalize this shame. You become an expert at suppressing your authentic responses, replacing them with what you think you're supposed to feel. But here's where it gets darker. Your nervous system knows you're lying to yourself. This creates chronic cognitive dissonance, a state where your conscious beliefs war against your unconscious drives. The result? Anxiety, depression, and a deep sense of being fundamentally wrong in your own skin. Phase 3 manifests in your adult relationships. You've been taught that traditional masculine traits, leadership, protectiveness, assertiveness, are patriarchal relics, so you abandon them. You become passive, deferential, constantly seeking permission and validation. You've been told this makes you evolved, enlightened, a real man for the modern age. But watch what happens in actual relationships. Women say they want these sensitive feminist men, but their actions tell a different story. They're attracted to confidence, not apologies. They want direction, not endless consensus seeking. They desire a man who knows himself, not one who's constantly checking if his existence is acceptable. And that's when reality hits, hard. You're lying in bed at 2 a.m., scrolling through your phone, seeing other men who never got the memo about toxic masculinity living the life you want. They're not apologizing for taking up space. They're not asking permission to have opinions. They're not dimming their light to make others comfortable. The silence is deafening. You realize you've spent years, maybe decades, living as a ghost of yourself. A sanitized version, a safe version, a neutered version that nobody really wants, not even you. The woman who left you didn't leave because you weren't good enough. She left because you weren't even there. How can someone love a performance? How can someone desire an apology? How can someone respect a man who doesn't respect his own nature? You feel it now, don't you? That anger rising. But even your anger has been programmed as unacceptable. So you swallow it. Again, like you always do. Here's what they never told you. Masculinity isn't toxic. The suppression of it is. When you deny fundamental aspects of human nature, you don't eliminate them. You drive them underground, where they fester and emerge in distorted ways. The crisis isn't that men are too masculine. It's that they're not allowed to be masculine at all. They're psychological refugees in their own culture, apologizing for existing while wondering why they feel so profoundly disconnected from everything, including themselves. Let's examine the mechanism behind this cultural gaslighting. You've heard of intermittent reinforcement? It's what makes gambling addictive. You get rewarded just often enough to keep playing, but not consistently enough to feel secure. Modern feminism has created the same dynamic for masculine expression. Sometimes standing up for yourself is praised as confidence. Sometimes it's condemned as toxic masculinity. Sometimes taking charge is leadership. Sometimes it's patriarchal oppression. You never know which response you'll get, so your nervous system stays in a constant state of hypervigilance, scanning for threats, trying to predict which version of yourself is safe to express. This psychological state has a name: learned helplessness. When an organism can't predict or control outcomes, it eventually stops trying. It accepts its powerlessness as permanent. Look around. How many men do you know who've simply checked out? Who've retreated into video games, pornography, or other virtual worlds where they can experience some simulacrum of agency and achievement? They're not lazy or weak. They're responding rationally to an impossible situation. But here's the truly insidious part. While men are being systematically deconstructed, they're simultaneously being blamed for all societal problems. You're told you benefit from privilege while watching your brothers fall behind in education, career advancement, and mental health outcomes. Male suicide rates are 4 times higher than female rates. Men make up 70% of the homeless population. Boys are failing in schools at unprecedented rates. But pointing out these realities makes you a misogynist or a men's rights activist, terms that have been weaponized to silence any discussion of male suffering. Let me paint you another scene. A young man, raised on feminist principles, enters the dating world. He's been taught that traditional courtship is outdated, that paying for dates is sexist, that making the first move could be harassment. So he waits for clear, enthusiastic consent at every stage. He splits every bill. He never escalates physically without explicit permission. He treats her exactly as he would treat a male friend, because anything else would be acknowledging gender differences which he's been taught don't really exist. Meanwhile, she's wondering why he seems so unsure, so unsexy, so utterly devoid of the masculine energy that creates polarity and attraction. She might consciously believe she wants a feminist man, but her biology, shaped by millions of years of evolution, is screening for strength, confidence, and the ability to provide and protect. The cognitive dissonance is crushing for both of them. He's doing everything right according to the rules he was given, but getting all the wrong results. She's experiencing attraction to traits she's been taught to despise, creating guilt and confusion about her own desires. This isn't theoretical. Studies from the University of Queensland and other institutions have found that even women who identify as feminists show stronger attraction to traditionally masculine men in their actual mate choices. The disconnect between stated preferences and revealed preferences creates a massive blind spot where nobody can be honest about what they actually want. The confusion extends beyond dating into every sphere of life. In the workplace, men are walking on eggshells. A compliment could be harassment. Mentoring a female colleague could be seen as inappropriate. Having a business dinner could be misconstrued. So men withdraw. They avoid one-on-one meetings with female colleagues. They exclude women from after-work networking, not from malice, but from self-preservation. The irony is staggering. The movement that sought to create more opportunities for women has made many men so fearful of false accusations that they're creating fewer opportunities. It's not right, but it's rational. When the cost of a misunderstanding could be your career, your reputation, your entire life, you minimize risk. And who suffers? Everyone. Women lose mentorship and advancement opportunities. Men lose the ability to form meaningful professional relationships. The workplace becomes a sterile, paranoid environment where genuine human connection is sacrificed on the altar of liability management. Think back to your childhood. How many positive male role models did you have? How many times were you told that boys and girls are exactly the same, despite observing obvious differences every single day? How many times was your natural competitive instinct punished while cooperative behavior was rewarded? You learned to play a rigged game. Be strong, but not too strong. Be emotional, but not too emotional. Lead, but only if asked. Protect, but don't assume she needs protection. Provide, but don't make her feel dependent. It's exhausting, isn't it? This constant mental gymnastics, this perpetual performance of being simultaneously everything and nothing. The educational system has been particularly brutal. Boys' learning styles, which tend to be more kinesthetic, competitive, and focused on systems rather than relationships, are seen as deficient rather than different. Instead of adapting teaching methods to serve all students, we medicate boys into compliance. ADHD diagnoses have skyrocketed, particularly among boys who are simply being boys in a system designed for girls. We're literally drugging masculinity out of children because it's inconvenient for the classroom management style that's become standard. Here's where it really hurts. Men are lonelier than ever. Traditional male spaces have been dismantled or invaded. Men's clubs are sexist. Male-only gyms are discriminatory. Even the concept of guy time is viewed with suspicion. What are you doing that women can't be part of? Why do you need space away from female oversight? But male friendship, historically, has been built through shared challenges, competition, and exclusive spaces where men could be vulnerable in distinctly masculine ways. Without these spaces, men have nowhere to process their experiences, no framework for understanding their struggles, no brotherhood to provide support and accountability. The result is an epidemic of male loneliness that nobody wants to talk about because acknowledging it would mean admitting that men have distinct needs that aren't being met. Social media makes it worse. You see carefully curated versions of other people's lives, making your own struggles seem unique and shameful. You can't reach out because vulnerability has been weaponized. Share your struggles as a man, and you're either trauma dumping or centering yourself in conversations about oppression. There's literally no winning move except silence. Let's talk about something nobody wants to discuss honestly. The current sexual marketplace is brutal for average men. Dating apps, which now account for how the majority of couples meet, have created a winner-take-all economy where the top 20% of men get 80% of the matches. This isn't opinion, it's data from multiple studies analyzing millions of swipes. You've been told that women are just as visual and sexually motivated as men, but the data tells a different story. Women rate 80% of men as below average in attractiveness. Think about that mathematical impossibility for a second. How can 80% be below average? It's because female attraction is more complex, more contextual, more dependent on status and behavior than pure physical appearance. But you're not allowed to say that because it implies gender differences, which modern feminism denies exist. So average men optimize for the wrong things. They think being nice, being feminist, being safe will make them attractive. But attraction isn't a choice, and it isn't negotiated through ideology. It's a primal response that doesn't care about your politics. The men who understand this, who maintain their masculine frame despite social pressure, clean up. The ones who bought into the narrative are invisible, wondering why doing everything right yields nothing but rejection and friend zones. The psychological toll is devastating. Male suicide rates aren't just statistics, they're the end result of this systematic dismantling of masculine identity. When you tell someone that everything they naturally are is wrong, when you provide no acceptable path for expressing their nature, when you shame them for their struggles while denying those struggles exist, what do you expect to happen? Men are seeking therapy in record numbers, but even there, they often find no relief. The therapeutic model itself has been feminized, focusing on emotional expression and vulnerability in ways that don't always align with how men process difficulty. Many men need to solve problems, not just talk about them. They need action plans, not just validation. But suggesting that men and women might benefit from different therapeutic approaches is, again, heresy. The antidepressant prescriptions keep climbing. The addiction rates keep rising. The dropout rates keep increasing. We're watching an entire generation of men psychologically collapse, and the response is to double down on the very ideology that created the crisis. More feminism, more deconstruction of masculinity, more shame for male spaces and male expression. Perhaps most tragically, this has created a generation of fathers who don't know how to raise sons. How do you teach a boy to be a man when you've been told that manhood itself is toxic? How do you model strength when strength is oppression? How do you prepare him for a world that will judge him by masculine standards while telling him those standards are wrong? So fathers retreat into safe, neutered versions of parenthood. They become additional mothers rather than fathers. They provide comfort but not challenge, safety but not strength, acceptance but not accountability. And their sons grow up with a father wound, not from absence, but from the absence of masculine energy, even when dad is present. These boys then seek masculine validation elsewhere in video games, where they can be heroes, in online communities where masculine excellence is still celebrated, in the gym where physical strength is still valued. But these are substitutes, not solutions. They're trying to fill a father-shaped hole with fragments of masculinity gleaned from wherever it hasn't been completely suppressed. What happens when you suppress something fundamental for too long? It explodes. We're seeing the beginning of this explosion now. The rise of figures who unapologetically embrace traditional masculinity. The growing communities of men who've rejected feminist programming. The quiet rebellion of men who've decided they'd rather be alone than apologize for existing. But here's the tragedy. This backlash often swings too far in the opposite direction. Hurt men looking for answers sometimes find them in genuinely toxic ideologies that mistake cruelty for strength, domination for leadership, misogyny for masculinity. The pendulum swings from one extreme to another, never finding the balance that actually serves everyone. This polarization serves no one. Women don't benefit from broken men any more than men benefit from a culture that breaks them. Children don't benefit from fathers who are either tyrants or ghosts. Society doesn't benefit from half its population being psychologically displaced. So what's the solution? First, recognize that you've been gaslit on a cultural scale. Your masculine instincts aren't wrong. They've been pathologized by people who either don't understand them or benefit from their suppression. Your desire to compete, to achieve, to protect, to provide, these aren't toxic, they're human. They're necessary. They're what built civilization and what maintains it. Second, understand that reclaiming your masculinity doesn't mean becoming a caricature. It doesn't mean dominating women or rejecting equality. It means being authentically yourself without apology, while respecting others' right to do the same. It means recognizing that men and women are equal in value but different in nature, and those differences are complementary, not competitive. Third, find your tribe. Seek out male spaces where you can be yourself without performance or apology, where you can be vulnerable in masculine ways through shared challenge, mutual respect, and earned trust, where your struggles are understood not as privilege, but as human experience worthy of compassion. But here's what really needs to be said. The war on masculinity isn't really about men at all. It's about power. It's about control. It's about creating a population that's easier to manage, to manipulate, to monetize. Strong men with clear values and firm boundaries are harder to control than confused, apologetic ones who constantly seek external validation. Think about who benefits from male confusion. Pharmaceutical companies selling antidepressants and ADHD medication. Therapy industries built on perpetual emotional processing rather than problem solving. Consumer markets that profit from men trying to buy their way to attractiveness because they've been stripped of intrinsic value. Political movements that need villains to justify their existence. You're not just fighting for your own psychological freedom. You're fighting against systems that profit from your confusion. Every man who reclaims his authentic nature, who refuses to apologize for his masculinity, who builds rather than destroys, who protects rather than exploits, every one of those men is a threat to the narrative that keeps this dysfunction profitable. What we're really talking about is generational trauma on a massive scale. Boys growing up without positive male role models become men who don't know how to be role models. The cycle perpetuates, each generation more confused than the last about what it means to be a man. But trauma can be healed. Patterns can be broken. It starts with individual men deciding they've had enough. Enough apology, enough performance, enough pretending that their nature is a problem to be solved rather than a force to be channeled constructively. This isn't about returning to the 1950s. It's about moving forward to something better, a synthesis that honors both masculine and feminine strengths without demonizing either. A culture that recognizes that diversity includes diversity of gender expression, that equality doesn't mean sameness, that respect doesn't require submission. You're standing at a crossroads. One path leads to continued suppression, continued apology, continued disconnection from your authentic self. It's safe. It's socially approved. It's also killing you slowly from the inside. The other path leads to reclamation, to standing up straight despite the pressure to slouch, to speaking truth despite the cost, to being fully, unapologetically yourself while respecting others' right to do the same. This path is harder. It's lonelier at first. It requires courage that's been systematically programmed out of you. But here's what I know. The pain of suppressing who you are is ultimately greater than the pain of expressing it. The cost of living as a ghost of yourself is higher than the cost of being rejected for being real. The slow death of spiritual suffocation is worse than the sharp pain of social judgment. Every man reading this has a choice to make. Continue the performance or drop the mask. Continue apologizing or start living. Continue asking permission to exist or simply exist without apology. The culture won't change until enough men simply refuse to participate in their own destruction. It won't change through argument or persuasion. It will change when men embody the change, when they live as examples of healthy masculinity that neither dominates nor apologizes, that stands firm without stepping on others. This isn't a call to anger, though anger is understandable. It's not a call to revenge, though the betrayal is real. It's a call to awakening, to recognizing that you've been sold a lie about your own nature, and that believing this lie is optional. The new generation of men hasn't been harmed by too much masculinity. They've been harmed by too little. They've been raised in a psychological prison where their nature is criminal, their instincts are suspect, and their existence requires constant justification. But prison breaks happen one man at a time. Each man who reclaims his authentic nature, who refuses to apologize for being male, who channels his masculine energy constructively rather than suppressing it, each of these men lights a path for others. The question isn't whether masculinity will survive. It will, because it's woven into the fabric of human nature. The question is whether this generation of men will survive the systematic attempt to separate them from it. Whether they'll push through the programming, the shame, the confusion, to find what's real and true and authentic within themselves. The revolution isn't coming. The revolution is here. It happens every time a man decides he's done apologizing for existing. Every time he chooses authenticity over approval. Every time he stands up straight in a culture that wants him on his knees. The truth is, you were never broken. You were just taught to break yourself. And here's the thing about self-inflicted wounds. They're the hardest to heal because you keep reopening them. Every time you apologize for taking up space, every time you soften your voice when you should speak with authority, every time you second-guess your instincts because they might be toxic, you're pressing on that wound. But healing begins with recognition, with understanding that the shame you feel about your masculine nature isn't natural, it's manufactured. It's a product sold to you by a culture that profits from your confusion. So what does reclamation look like in practical terms? It doesn't mean becoming the caricature that feminism warns against. It doesn't mean domination or cruelty or insensitivity. Those aren't masculine traits, they're human failings that can manifest in anyone. True masculine reclamation means reconnecting with the positive aspects of masculinity that have been deliberately obscured. The protector instinct that builds safe communities. The competitive drive that pushes innovation. The stoic strength that provides stability in chaos. The leadership capacity that guides and mentors. The warrior spirit that stands against genuine injustice. It means understanding that these traits aren't toxic, their suppression is. When you bottle up natural masculine energy, it doesn't disappear. It ferments. It turns inward. It becomes the very thing critics claim to fear: undirected, frustrated, potentially destructive force. Consider the young men turning to extreme ideologies, not because they're inherently radical, but because they're desperately seeking any framework that doesn't require them to hate themselves. When mainstream culture offers only shame, the extremes offer identity. When society says your nature is toxic, anyone who says otherwise seems like a prophet. One of feminism's most effective tactics has been the disruption of male bonds. Men gathering without female supervision is viewed with suspicion. Male-only spaces are discriminatory. Male friendship is mocked as bromance. Male mentorship is potentially predatory. But throughout history, boys became men through the guidance of other men, through initiation, through challenge, through the passing down of wisdom and values. This chain has been deliberately broken, leaving young men to figure out masculinity through YouTube videos and internet forums. The reclamation begins with rebuilding these bonds, with older men stepping up to mentor, despite the risk of being misunderstood, with young men seeking out positive male role models despite being told they don't need them, with men supporting each other's growth, despite a culture that sees male solidarity as threatening. This isn't about excluding women or opposing them. It's about recognizing that men need male guidance to become good men, just as women need female guidance to become good women. The denial of this basic truth has created a generation of lost boys in men's bodies. Perhaps the greatest damage done to this generation of men is the fear of being truly seen. When your nature is considered toxic, visibility becomes vulnerability. Better to remain small, quiet, agreeable. Better to perform the approved version of masculinity defanged, declawed, domesticated. But authenticity requires courage. The courage to be disliked. The courage to be misunderstood. The courage to stand for something in a culture that rewards standing for nothing. The courage to be masculine in a world that's forgotten why masculinity exists. This doesn't mean being needlessly provocative or deliberately offensive. It means being willing to express your authentic self, even when that self doesn't align with current fashion. It means trusting your instincts even when they're labeled problematic. It means pursuing your purpose even when that purpose doesn't center on making others comfortable. With reclamation comes responsibility. The men who break free from this psychological prison have an obligation to use their freedom wisely, not to prove critics right by becoming the monsters they've been painted as, but to demonstrate what positive masculinity actually looks like. This means channeling competitive drive into excellence, not exploitation. Using strength to build and protect, not to bully or dominate. Leading with vision and integrity, not ego and insecurity. Being dangerous in the sense of being capable, not in the sense of being cruel. It means becoming the kind of man that even critics secretly hope will show up when real danger appears. The kind whose strength provides safety, whose leadership provides direction, whose presence provides stability. The kind who proves through action that masculine energy, properly directed, is not just beneficial but essential. The harm done to this generation of men is real, measurable, and ongoing. But harm doesn't have to mean defeat. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from recovering from the greatest wounds. Sometimes the most authentic men are those who've had to fight to reclaim their authenticity. You are not toxic for being male. You are not oppressive for being strong. You are not problematic for having ambition, drive, and the desire to lead. These aren't flaws to be corrected. They're features to be refined. The world needs what you have to offer, even if it won't admit it. It needs your strength when times get hard. It needs your protection when danger appears. It needs your leadership when direction is lost. It needs your competition to drive innovation. It needs your stoicism to provide stability. Most importantly, you need what you have to offer. You need to feel the satisfaction of living aligned with your nature. You need the confidence that comes from embracing rather than suppressing your instincts. You need the peace that comes from stopping the constant war against yourself. The journey back to authentic masculinity isn't easy. It requires swimming against powerful cultural currents. It requires thinking critically about messages you've absorbed since childhood. It requires the courage to be seen as you truly are, not as you're supposed to be. But on the other side of that journey is something worth fighting for. The experience of being fully, unapologetically, authentically yourself. Of channeling your masculine energy toward purpose and meaning. Of building rather than apologizing. Of leading rather than shrinking. Of protecting rather than performing. The new generation of men has been harmed, yes, but not broken, not defeated, not beyond recovery. The awakening is happening, one man at a time. The only question is whether you'll be part of it. Remember, you were never the problem. The suppression of your nature was the problem. And that suppression ends the moment you decide it does. Stand tall. Speak truth. Be dangerous in the best sense, capable, competent, and unwilling to be diminished. The world needs good men now more than ever. And good men are made not by denying their masculinity, but by embracing and refining it. This is your call to awakening. This is your invitation to reclaim what was always yours. This is your moment to stop breaking yourself and start building yourself. The revolution isn't coming. The revolution is you.